She left work smiling, keys in her hand, her future ahead of her, and within 15 minutes she was gone forever. 19-year-old Claire Donovan vanished on her way home one summer night in 1998, and what investigators found near the Willow Creek Bridge would terrify an entire town for decades. This is not just a story about a missing girl. It is about secrets buried in the shadows, a trail that led nowhere, and the chilling possibility that a killer still walks free. Claire was the kind of girl everyone in Willow Creek knew by name, bright, ambitious, with strawberry blonde hair that caught the light, and a contagious laugh that carried across a room. She was saving money for college, working long hours at Miller's Diner, a spot that sat at the edge of town and drew in truckers, travelers, and the occasional late-night drifter. The kind of place where the neon lights buzzed against the night sky and the smell of grease and coffee lingered on your clothes long after you left. On July 17, 1998, Claire worked the closing shift, clocking out just after 11:45 p.m., and according to her manager, she was cheerful, joking with another waitress about a movie they planned to see that weekend. Nothing seemed out of place. No shadow looming over her. No warning of what was to come. Her route home was familiar, just 2 miles down Highway 62, past the old bridge, and then a right turn onto Willow Creek Road, a narrow stretch lined with woods so dense that even the moonlight barely penetrated the canopy. It was a road locals avoided at night, whispering stories of strange noises and eerie sightings. But for Claire, it was routine, a path she had taken countless times. When midnight came and went, and Claire still hadn't returned home, her mother grew uneasy, calling friends, then the diner, and finally the county sheriff. By dawn, a search party had formed, neighbors and volunteers combing the roadside ditches, calling her name into the thick trees, while deputies walked with flashlights scanning for tire tracks or footprints. And that's when they made their first chilling discovery. Claire's car, a faded blue Honda Civic, abandoned near the Willow Creek Bridge. Driver's side door ajar, keys still dangling in the ignition, her purse resting on the passenger seat as if she had just stepped out for a moment. But there was no sign of Claire anywhere. Deputies searched the car for evidence, but what they found raised more questions than answers. The driver's seat had been pushed back further than Claire would have needed, as if someone much taller had been behind the wheel. The radio was turned to a station she never listened to, and in the cup holder was a half-empty soda bottle that no one in her family recognized. Later testing revealed an unknown set of partial prints, too smudged to make a clear match, but enough to suggest someone else had been inside her vehicle that night. Detectives canvassed the area, interviewing late-night drivers who had passed through Willow Creek Road, and 2 separate witnesses reported seeing a dark-colored pickup truck parked on the shoulder near the bridge, engine idling, its headlights off. But no one could provide a plate number, and when the description was broadcast across state lines, nothing turned up. Another lead came from a waitress at the diner, who recalled a middle-aged drifter named John. No one ever knew his last name, who had been sitting in the corner booth almost every night for weeks, drinking black coffee and watching Claire more closely than anyone liked. He had asked her about her shifts, her walk home, even about whether she had a boyfriend. But when investigators tried to track him down, he had vanished, his trail as cold as the mountain air. As fear gripped Willow Creek, rumors began to spiral out of control. Some swore they heard screaming near the bridge on the night she disappeared. Others whispered about satanic cults rumored to meet in the woods, citing strange fires seen after midnight. And one local hunter even reported finding small animal bones arranged in disturbing patterns near the creek bed, though deputies dismissed it as superstition. Still, these stories spread like wildfire, and many believed that Claire's disappearance was not random, but tied to something darker that had been festering in the town's shadows. Then came the discovery that shifted the case entirely. 2 weeks after Claire's disappearance, a hiker stumbled upon a single white sneaker in the woods 3 miles from the bridge, its laces frayed, mud caked into the sole and inside, strands of hair matching Claire's DNA nearby. Investigators found a circle of rocks arranged almost ritualistically, with burnt fragments of paper in the center. Fragments that, when reconstructed, appeared to be pages from Claire's own diary, her private, thoughts scorched and scattered, suggesting that whoever took her had access to her belongings long after she disappeared, or worse, wanted to taunt those searching for her. The FBI was brought in, but their presence only deepened the town's unease. Agents went door to door, seizing boxes of evidence, questioning locals with lie detectors, and even excavating a section of the creek bed after cadaver dogs alerted. But once again, nothing conclusive was found. Months turned into years, and the case began to gather dust until 2003, when a chilling new discovery sent shockwaves through the region. Skeletal remains unearthed in a shallow grave just beyond Willow Creek Road. Investigators feared they had finally found Claire, but DNA testing revealed a horrifying twist. The bones belonged to another young woman who had vanished from a neighboring county in 1995, a case that had also gone unsolved, suggesting that perhaps Claire had not been the first, and likely not the last, victim of whoever stalked that part of Appalachia. Suddenly, theories of a lone predator gained traction, with investigators quietly considering the possibility of a serial killer who knew the woods well enough to hide bodies in plain sight, a hunter who blended into the fabric of rural life, unnoticed and unchallenged. Locals still whisper about a retired miner named Frank Dillard, a reclusive man who lived in a shack near the ridge and was known for wandering the roads at night, carrying a lantern and muttering to himself. He had a criminal record for assault in the 1970s, but no hard evidence ever linked him to Claire, and when he died in 2007, some believed the truth of Willow Creek went with him to the grave. Today, more than 2 decades later, Claire Donovan's case remains unsolved. Her parents long since moved away from Willow Creek, unable to bear the weight of unanswered questions. Her friends left with fading memories of a girl who once dreamed of a bigger life beyond the diner, and a town forever scarred by the night she vanished into the trees, with nothing but an abandoned car, a single shoe, and 1,000 unanswered questions left to tell the tale. Some locals claim to still hear her voice when they drive across the Willow Creek Bridge at night, a soft echo calling for help from somewhere deep in the woods, a chilling reminder that not all ghosts belong to the past, and that some stories remain open wounds, waiting to be solved. And if you think the disappearance of Claire Donovan is unsettling, wait until you hear the next story, one that begins not with a missing girl, but with a family whose darkest secrets were buried in the walls of their own home.
If you're hooked by the chilling twists in today's story and want to hear more jaw-dropping true crime cases, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for even more shocking revelations right here on True Crime Wave.
It began with a smell faint at first, but strong enough to turn neighbors' heads when the wind shifted, a smell that seemed to seep out of the aging Holloway house at the edge of town, a once proud Victorian home that had stood for nearly a century, its peeling paint and boarded windows hiding secrets no one could have imagined. And by the time authorities forced their way inside, what they uncovered was so disturbing that it would forever change the way the community of Fairview looked at the family who had lived there. The Holloways were, on the surface, an unremarkable family, Walter and Margaret Holloway, and their 2 children, Daniel and Caroline. Known mostly for keeping to themselves, they rarely attended church, seldom joined town gatherings, and their house seemed frozen in time, curtains drawn even on the brightest days, lawn overgrown, the kind of place children dared each other to run past at night, whispering that something wasn't right inside. For years, rumors swirled, whispers of strange noises echoing after midnight, flickers of candlelight behind the dusty windows, and yet no one could have predicted the horror that lay just beyond the front door. It was the summer of 2006 when the mystery finally broke open, sparked by Caroline, the youngest daughter, who had grown increasingly distant. showing up at school with hollow eyes and bruises hidden beneath long sleeves. Her teachers took notice, calling Child Protective Services. But the Holloways refused entry to social workers, citing privacy and homeschooling, a defense that kept outsiders at bay until one neighbor, troubled by the worsening stench emanating from the property, phoned the sheriff, claiming the Holloways must be hiding something dead inside their walls. Deputies arrived expecting to find animals or perhaps neglect, but when they pried open the front door, what hit them was far worse than they could ever prepare for: the overwhelming stench of decay, mixed with mildew and rot, a smell so powerful officers gagged before stepping inside. And as flashlights swept across the dim, cluttered hallways, their beams froze on something unthinkable. Dozens of padlocks securing certain doors, shut from the outside. Heavy chains looped across basement steps, and handwritten notes scrawled in shaky letters taped to the walls with words like "Do not enter" and "Stay hidden." The deeper they went, the stranger it became, every room packed with trash bags, broken furniture, and stacks of newspapers dating back years, creating narrow pathways through a maze of hoarded filth. And yet what haunted investigators most was what they found behind a locked door at the end of the hall, an upstairs bedroom sealed from the outside, the air inside rancid and heavy, walls lined with scratched messages, please carved into the plaster that read, "Let me out," "He's coming," and "Help us." On the stained mattress lay a bundle of bones, small and fragile, wrapped in a tattered blanket, later confirmed to belong to a child no older than 8 years old. A child who, according to dental records, had never been reported missing and whose very existence had been hidden from the outside world. The community was stunned, reporters flooding Fairview as the Holloway family was taken into custody, Walter grim and silent, Margaret weeping hysterically, Daniel unresponsive, and Caroline trembling as though she had finally escaped a prison built not of steel bars, but of family secrets and fear. As investigators dug deeper, more horrors surfaced. Beneath the basement floorboards, they uncovered another set of remains, this time belonging to an adult female, buried shallowly in the dirt, her skull fractured, her jaw broken. Later identified through DNA as Walter's first wife, a woman locals had long believed had run away decades earlier after abandoning her family, a woman whose absence had been explained with lies, while her body lay hidden beneath her own home. What shocked authorities most, however, was the meticulous way the family had concealed these deaths, records altered, photographs burned, and neighbors manipulated with stories designed to explain away absences and questions. Yet what remained unclear was how much Margaret and the children had been willing participants, and how much they had been trapped themselves in Walter's grip. Caroline told detectives in chilling detail that her father controlled every aspect of their lives, locking them into rooms for days without food, forcing them to follow rituals where silence was mandatory, and teaching them that outsiders were dangerous, a conditioning so deep that she admitted it took her years to realize the world beyond their home was safe. The padlocked doors, the scratched walls, the stench that had leaked out, it all painted a picture of a home that had become a tomb, a prison, and a graveyard all at once. Rumors spread quickly in Fairview, some swearing they had seen strange figures moving behind the Holloway's curtains at odd hours, others recalling how Walter always seemed to glare at passers-by, as if daring them to question what lay inside, and many began to wonder if the Holloways had been part of something bigger, a cult or secret society, hiding within the community's blind spots, though investigators never found evidence to confirm it. Walter was charged with multiple counts of murder, abuse, and unlawful imprisonment, but before his trial could begin, he was found dead in his cell, having hanged himself with a bedsheet, leaving behind a single note that read simply, "You will never know the truth." Margaret pleaded guilty to lesser charges, claiming she too had been a prisoner of Walter's abuse, while Daniel, emotionally broken, was placed under psychiatric care, and Caroline, who had been the key to unraveling the mystery, was relocated under a new identity, given a chance to escape the shadows of her past. To this day, Holloway House stands abandoned, its windows shattered, walls covered in graffiti, but locals insist no one dares go near it after dark, claiming strange whispers echo from the empty halls, and lights flicker in the upper bedroom even though the house has no power, as if the souls trapped there refuse to rest. Some say Caroline still drives past the property once a year, sitting in her car across the street, staring at the place where her childhood ended, and where secrets darker than any horror movie came to life. The case of the Holloway family remains one of the most disturbing in the region's history, not only for the crimes committed, but for the realization that it all unfolded behind closed doors, undetected by neighbors, teachers, or even authorities, until the smell of death forced the truth into the open. And as unsettling as this family's story is, our next case takes us into even more terrifying territory. If this story makes you wondering how entire community was manipulated and put in the dark, don't forget to like and hit the subscribe button. It started with a bonfire, flames rising against the night sky in the quiet town of Millstone, Pennsylvania, a small community where people once trusted their neighbors, left doors unlocked, and gathered at the diner after Sunday service. But in the summer of 1998, locals began whispering about strange gatherings deep in the pine forest just beyond town, chanting that carried on until dawn, flickering lights moving between the trees, and cars from out of state parked along the dirt roads there, license plates covered with mud to obscure where they came from. And when hunters stumbled on a clearing littered with animal bones arranged in perfect circles, rumors spread that something sinister had taken root in Millstone, a cult calling themselves the Covenant of Eternal Light. The cult was led by a man named Elias Warren, a charismatic figure in his late 40s, with piercing gray eyes and a voice that seemed to wrap around anyone who listened, drawing them in, convincing them he carried divine truth. Elias had once been a failed preacher, ousted from his church for extremist views, but in Millstone he found new followers, lonely souls, runaways, addicts, and even respected townspeople disillusioned with their lives, all drawn into his promises of salvation and rebirth through fire. For years, the group lived on the fringes, renting cabins, farming small plots of land, mostly ignored by locals who considered them odd but harmless, until a series of disappearances shook the town awake. First a teenage girl who never made it home from a friend's house, then a truck driver whose rig was found abandoned near the forest, and finally a mother and her young son who vanished after attending a healing retreat hosted by Elias himself. Police began investigating, but found little more than frightened whispers, no one willing to speak on record, and those who tried described being stalked, their tires slashed, their pets killed, a message from the cult that silence was the only safe choice. The turning point came when fire crews were called to extinguish a blaze in the pines, a bonfire that had spread out of control, and among the ashes they discovered charred remains, not of animals this time, but human. A woman's bones fused to metal shackles, her teeth shattered, her jaw wired shut as if someone wanted to silence her even in death. Panic gripped Millstone, and investigators descended on the town, questioning anyone who had ties to the Covenant. But Elias and his followers were skilled at erasing evidence, moving camps, and presenting themselves as nothing more than a prayer group when authorities pressed too hard. Still, fragments of truth emerged, journal entries from defectors describing purification rituals, where members were forced to kneel in the firelight while Elias marked their skin with hot irons, children separated from parents and told they now belonged to him, families forbidden from leaving under threat of eternal damnation, and above all, a prophecy Elias preached of a coming night when the chosen would ascend while unbelievers burned. As the investigation deepened, one chilling discovery stood out: a mass grave hidden beneath a collapsed shed on the edge of the cult's land, containing at least 6 bodies. Their identities difficult to confirm, but believed to be missing persons from neighboring towns, each corpse bound with rope, blindfolded, and arranged in a ritualistic star formation. The dirt above them mixed with candle wax and animal blood. What made the case even darker was how far the cult's reach. Extended bank records revealed that Elias had convinced followers to sign over homes, savings, even custody of their children, leaving them entirely dependent on him. And those who resisted were punished, beaten, or simply vanished, their names never spoken again. Locals began to live in fear, avoiding the pine forest at night, locking doors they once left open. Children warned never to wander near the trees, and still Elias's influence grew, spreading to neighboring towns where desperate souls sought him out for promises of healing, only to disappear into the shadows of the pines. The FBI was eventually called in, classifying the group as a dangerous cult, and an undercover agent infiltrated the gatherings, posing as a drifter, attending midnight ceremonies where Elias spoke of the coming day of cleansing, a night when all fire would consume the earth and only his flock would be spared. But before authorities could act, tragedy struck on October 12, 2001. The cult carried out what survivors later called the burning, a mass ritual deep in the woods where more than 30 members set themselves ablaze in the clearing, chanting Elias's name as flames engulfed them, while Elias himself disappeared into the smoke and was never seen again. Emergency responders who arrived on scene described it as a nightmare, bodies still burning, survivors in shock, some children huddled together weeping, others eerily calm, repeating Elias's sermons as if in a trance, and yet no trace of Elias was found. Not among the dead, not in the forest, not anywhere in the days, months, or years that followed. If this story raises a shock that leaves you questioning everything about Elias Warren, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime documentaries. Authorities assumed he died in the inferno, but locals insist otherwise, claiming to see him in fleeting glimpses near the pines, an old man with gray eyes watching from the tree line, vanishing before anyone could approach. The case was eventually closed as a mass suicide, but questions linger. What happened to the dozens of missing persons linked to the cult who were never recovered? How many bodies remain hidden in the woods? And most disturbingly, was Elias truly gone? Or did he escape, carrying his twisted beliefs to new towns, new followers, and new fires? Today, the clearing where the ritual took place is overgrown, nature reclaiming the scorched earth, but hunters still refuse to enter, swearing they hear chanting in the wind, see shadows moving between the trees, and smell smoke on nights when no fire burns. Survivors have scattered, some breaking free of Elias's spell, others still clinging to the belief that he will return to finish what he started. And for the people of Millstone, the pines have become a place of silence, fear, and unanswered questions. And as terrifying as it is to imagine a cult capable of such destruction, our next story proves that sometimes evil doesn't hide in the woods or behind locked doors. It can walk in plain sight, wearing the face of someone you thought you knew, someone you trusted completely, until the moment they turned and revealed the monster they truly were. He was the kind of man you never suspected, the one who waved from his porch every morning, shoveled driveways for elderly neighbors, and organized backyard barbecues where kids laughed and adults felt safe. And yet behind that friendly smile and suburban charm hid one of the darkest secrets the town of Brookhaven, Illinois had ever known, because sometimes the face you trust the most is the one hiding the deepest rot. His name was Richard Cole, a 42-year-old father of two, husband, and insurance agent who had lived on Maple Street for nearly a decade without raising a single eyebrow. He was the guy who lent you jumper cables when your car wouldn't start, who brought over homemade chili during snowstorms, the man who seemed incapable of cruelty. But that image began to crumble on a chilly November evening in 2009 when his next-door neighbor, 16-year-old Amanda Lewis, vanished on her way home from choir practice. At first, the town rallied, searching parks, woods, and backroads, posting flyers with Amanda's smiling face, her braces barely visible, her eyes full of life. And Richard was among the most vocal, handing out flyers, organizing search parties, telling reporters how much he cared for the Lewis family, how Amanda was like a niece to him. But as days turned into weeks with no sign of her, whispers began to ripple through Brookhaven. Whispers that maybe the predator wasn't a stranger passing through town. Maybe he was already here, hiding in plain sight. Those whispers grew louder when a jogger discovered Amanda's phone in a storm drain less than a block from Richard's home. Its case cracked, screen smeared with what forensics later identified as her blood, and when detectives canvassed the neighborhood, they noticed something unsettling. Richard's security cameras, which supposedly monitored his property, had curiously malfunctioned. The very night Amanda disappeared, the footage erased, the explanation flimsy. Still, there wasn't enough to accuse him, so the case stalled. Until 6 months later, when another girl, 14-year-old Megan Carver, vanished after walking home from a friend's house. Her backpack, discovered in a trash bin just 3 streets over, her shoes neatly placed beside it, as if someone wanted to mock the police. Panic gripped Brookhaven, parents refusing to let children walk alone, rumors spreading that a serial predator was stalking the town. And once again, Richard was at the forefront of the search, smiling for cameras, speaking passionately about community vigilance, even raising money for the victims' families. But behind closed doors, detectives had begun to suspect the man who seemed too eager, too present, the man always at the center of grief, yet untouched by it. Their suspicions sharpened when a routine sweep of missing persons databases revealed a chilling pattern. Richard had lived in 3 other towns before Brookhaven, and in each one, young girls had disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. Cases never solved, never linked, until now. With this revelation, police obtained a warrant to search his home, and what they found in the basement would forever scar the community. Behind a false wall concealed by shelves of paint cans lay a hidden room, soundproofed with foam, furnished with a cot, chains bolted to the floor, and shelves lined with videotapes marked only by dates, each one containing hours of recorded torment inflicted on victims whose faces were now familiar from cold case files. The discovery sent shockwaves through Brookhaven, but the true horror was yet to come, because among the tapes was one that showed Amanda, alive long after the town had given up hope, pleading into the camera for her parents, her voice hoarse, her body weak. And then the footage ended without showing what became of her, leaving only silence and the weight of unanswered questions. Richard was arrested, his mask finally torn away, but the trial that followed exposed even deeper fractures in the community, because neighbors who had praised him for years now admitted they had ignored small red flags, the way he lingered too long watching children play, the excuses for why his wife and kids were suddenly absent for long stretches, the uneasy feelings some said they couldn't quite explain, all brushed aside because Richard was such a good guy. Prosecutors painted him as a calculating predator who had built his life around the perfect disguise, blending into every town he entered, earning trust, embedding himself into families, and then striking with precision. While the defense argued he was a victim of circumstance, evidence planted, tapes fabricated, but the jury didn't buy it. He was convicted on multiple counts of kidnapping, murder, and assault, sentenced to life without parole, and yet for the families of Amanda and Megan, justice was a hollow word, because Amanda's body was never found. Her parents left to wonder if she might still be alive somewhere, hidden away by a man who had fooled them for years. Even after his conviction, strange letters surfaced, anonymous notes mailed to Amanda's family claiming she was alive, describing details of her childhood only she could know, letters traced back to no one, fueling speculation that Richard wasn't working alone, that perhaps he had accomplices who continued his twisted work even as he sat behind bars. Brookhaven was left broken, its sense of safety shattered. Maple Street no longer a friendly row of homes, but a reminder of betrayal, of how evil can hide behind the brightest smile, the warmest handshake, the most familiar face. And to this day, parents in that town teach their children the lesson they learned too late. Sometimes the monster lives next door. But as chilling as Richard Cole's double life was, our final story tonight reveals something even more terrifying. Not a predator hiding behind a neighborly mask, not a cult leader in the shadows of the forest, but an ordinary family whose hunger for survival drove them to cross every line, proving that sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who will take everything from you when the world turns dark. They were once the picture of resilience, a family admired for sticking together through hardship, the Johnsons of Ironwood, Michigan, a mining town that had seen better days, where jobs had dried up, homes were abandoned, and hope seemed to wither under the weight of poverty. Yet behind their weathered smiles and closed curtains, the Johnsons were hiding a secret so horrifying it would stain the town's history forever. Because when survival became too hard, they didn't just steal or beg, they killed. It began in the winter of 1985, one of the harshest the region had seen in decades, temperatures plummeting, snow piling up so high that entire streets were buried, and with the mines long shut down, work scarce, and welfare stretched thin, the Johnsons, Walter, the father, a laid-off miner, Ruth, the mother, a quiet church-going woman, and their 3 teenage children found themselves on the brink of starvation. At first, they survived off canned goods and the kindness of neighbors, but as weeks dragged on and cupboards emptied, something inside Walter snapped. According to later testimony from the surviving children, Walter began speaking of doing whatever it takes, of how the world was cold and cruel, and only the strong deserved to live. That philosophy turned deadly one night in February when a traveling salesman, stranded by a snowstorm, knocked on their door seeking shelter. The Johnsons welcomed him in with warm smiles and hot tea, but by morning he was gone. At least that's what they told neighbors. In reality, the salesman had been bludgeoned to death in his sleep, his wallet emptied, his body buried in the frozen ground behind the house, and his car stripped for parts to keep the Johnsons warm. That first kill unlocked something in Walter, a dark conviction that killing was no longer murder, but a means of survival, and slowly, he pulled the rest of his family into his twisted logic. Over the next 2 years, drifters, hitchhikers, and even desperate locals who came to the Johnsons for help vanished without a trace, their disappearances chalked up to the economic despair that plagued the region until one spring, Mr. Thaw revealed the truth. An amateur treasure hunter exploring the woods near the Johnson property stumbled upon shallow graves, bones protruding from the melting snow, human remains gnawed by animals, scraps of clothing still clinging to the corpses. Authorities descended on the Johnson home, and what they uncovered was nothing short of a house of horrors. Bloodstains scrubbed but never fully erased from the floorboards, a locked cellar containing clothing, wallets, and personal items from at least a dozen missing persons, and in the barn, a pit filled with bones too numerous to count. The Johnson children, ages 17, 15, and 13, told investigators chilling stories of how their father forced them to participate, making them lure victims with offers of food and shelter, then holding them down as Walter delivered the fatal blows, all under the justification that family must feed family. Ruth, the mother, admitted to cooking stews and roasts with meat she sometimes suspected was an animal, but claimed she never dared ask questions, afraid of Walter's wrath, afraid of losing her place in the family's fragile, monstrous unity. The town of Ironwood was left in disbelief. Neighbors who had shared meals with the Johnsons, who had prayed with them in church, now faced the horrifying truth that an entire family had been complicit in a killing spree that stretched across years, perhaps longer, with the full victim count never confirmed. Investigators estimated at least 20 victims, but given the scattered remains and incomplete records, some believe the true number could be double. The trial was one of the most sensational in Michigan's history, prosecutors describing the Johnson home as a slaughterhouse disguised as a farmhouse, while the defense argued poverty and desperation had warped the family's minds, turning survival into savagery. Walter was sentenced to death, Ruth to life in prison, and the children, tried as juveniles, were placed in state care, though whispers followed them into adulthood, rumors that they never escaped the darkness instilled by their father. Some former foster parents claimed the kids drew disturbing pictures, reenacted the killings with dolls, or spoke of hearing their father's voice in their heads, telling them to keep the family bond alive at any cost. The Johnson house was eventually torn down, the land left barren, but locals say the ground still feels cursed, animals refusing to graze there, hunters reporting strange noises at night, the cries of the lost echoing from the soil. To this day, Ironwood carries the scar, a reminder that evil doesn't always come from outsiders or strangers in the night. Sometimes it grows inside the very walls meant to keep you safe, nurtured by desperation, sharpened by hunger, and justified by a twisted love of family. And so, as we close these 5 chilling stories, each one different, yet bound by a common thread of betrayal, manipulation, and horror, the lesson is as unsettling as it is unforgettable. Monsters don't always lurk in shadows. Sometimes they sit beside you at church. Sometimes they wave from the porch next door. Sometimes they gather in the woods chanting promises of salvation. And sometimes they sit at your very dinner table, smiling, while hiding the darkest of appetites. If you're hooked by the chilling twists in today's story and want to hear more jaw-dropping true crime cases, disappearance, and justice, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for even more shocking revelations right here on True Crime Wave.